This conference will now be recorded.
My audio still is not working. I know that you can hear me, but I'm going to try to log on to one other device. I'm not really sure what's going on with the audio. Paul, unless you have a suggestion.
No, I'm not. I don't know.
While I'm doing this, Pam, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you so we can get things rolling this evening. Um, I'd like to say welcome to Ohio STC and our webinar this evening. We are just so happy to have you here, and thank you so much for giving us some of your evening to share such valuable information. Pam Bichsel has 15 years experience in higher education. She has worked as an MBA program coordinator. She's done academic programming coordinator. She's been an instructor at the college level, working and helping students with study skills. And her forte is mentoring and coaching. And I know a lot of us in STC have been talking about our colleagues that perhaps are transitioning out or retiring. And it's, left up to those of us that are there to mentor people in. And I thought, wow, Pam would just be phenomenal with this, especially with COVID and everything that's gone on. We do need a lot of coaching. We do need a lot of mentoring, not necessarily cheerleading, but a lot of encouragement is behind this. And there is formal techniques to use, and Pam is going to be sharing some of those with us this evening. So without further ado, Pam, please take the floor.
Thanks, Cal. All right. I have no idea if this technology is going to work tonight, but we will try. I'm hoping that you can see my screen, my presentation, because I cannot see the same things that you guys see. So you'll have to tell me if you can see what I'm trying to show. So at this moment, can you see my main slide, the title slide?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. So I was going to ask a personal favor to ask everyone to leave their cameras turned on. I know, especially at this time of night, it's easy to kind of like click off and just kind of multitask. But just as a favor, if you could keep your camera on, just because as a presenter, it really helps to read what's happening. Communication, so much of it is nonverbal, and in this case, it would be facial expression, so I can see if I'm boring the life out of you or if I can move on to see how engaged you are. So for all those reasons, I would ask you keep your cameras on. Again, this is a little bit different format for me that I'm used to. So if I'm going, back and forth between sharing my screen and not sharing my screen, I will try to make that as seamlessly as possible, though I'm not really familiar with this format here, this GoToMeeting. So, okay, so let's dive right in. As Kelly mentioned, I am an academic coach. I'm the co-founder of a company named Academic Coaching Specialists, where we've specialized in working with students that are having challenges either in high school or transitioning into college at the college level. And I'm also a technical writer. I've been a technical writer for about 10 years, on and off doing different assignments. And then I also like to add to my resume there, super mom, because all of those things make up what I do in a day. And so I wouldn't want to take any one of those off of there. So All those things kind of go into my intro. So let's kind of jump in. If you can see my second slide here, actually my first slide, that's not my introduction. So the name of the presentation is I can't be a mentor, and other lies we tell ourselves, right? And so here you see a few of these lies that we tell ourselves about why we couldn't be a mentor when thinking about whether or not you would like to be a mentor. And the first one in the top left-hand corner is one that kind of reverberates for a lot of people. I'm not good enough for someone to want to be like me. Okay, that's a huge misconception, and it kind of sounds like very arrogant, like, oh, I'm so wonderful, people should want to be like me. That's what mentorship must be, right? But that's not an accurate depiction of what it is, and we'll get into why. I don't have time, right? That's another thing that we tell ourselves all the time. We just don't have time. We're so busy, and we all are so busy. But as you know, the things that we find important, we have to schedule out time for. We have to dedicate some time for the things that we find important. And mentorship is important. We don't have patience, especially for those of us who have been in our positions or jobs for a longer period of time. We feel sometimes our patience waning, and that we just wouldn't have it in us to take on a mentee at this point. So we'll talk about that. I just want to go to work and do my job. I don't want these extra outside stressful things that I have to think about when I'm not at work. No one wants to hear what I have to say. Again, that's kind of the internal conversation we have over and over. I'm not good enough, and nobody's going to want to be like me. No one's going to want to hear what I have to say. If you are retiring or leaving your position, changing different positions, you might think no one wants to do, they're going to want to do the things their way when they come into this position. So there's nothing that I have to tell them that they're going to appreciate. They're going to want to do things how they want to do them. So there's no point in me passing along my knowledge. I'm too old. Nobody wants to learn things from me. I don't relate to the younger generation. I don't have anything in common. They're not going to have anything I have to say. They're not going to want to hear, and vice versa. If there's students on this call here, I apologize. I can't see the whole screen of everybody that's in attendance, but they might think I'm too young. Like, what experiences do I have to share at this point in my life? No one older than me would want to hear what I have to say. I'm no expert, right? I'm not an expert in anything. Even those of us that have higher degrees, master's degrees, PhDs in specific areas, we might consider ourselves an expert in our field. But when it comes to mentoring people in a certain thing, we always tend to downgrade ourselves and say, well, I'm no expert, or we start sentences or conversations with that when we introduce things. I'm no expert. Well, what is an expert? Someone who has expertise in a certain area. So really, legitimately, you are an expert in certain areas that you can share. And I don't know how, okay? So all of these things are just, things that we tell ourselves that, trying to put some humor here in this presentation. Lies, right? Rather excuses, really, that we tell ourselves. These things over and over again, we internalize them, and we feel like if we tell them to ourselves enough, it legitimizes them and makes it excusable for us not to pass along our knowledge and things that we have the abilities to work with people on. So let's talk about what a mentor looks like. If you can't picture yourself as a mentor yet, we want to talk about the physical nature of a mentor. What do you picture in your head when you think about what a mentor looks like? So traditionally, we think about perhaps in the workplace, and I'll use the words older and younger, not to be offensively, but just to be honest and truthful, an older person in the workplace and a younger person in the workplace. The younger, learning things from the older. But mentorship, of course, can also look like a teacher, like teaching. Think of that one teacher that you absolutely loved throughout school you had a wonderful experience with. That's mentorship, and it's in another form. It doesn't always have to be formalized mentorship. We have mentorship in the form of elders, right? Parents, maybe, other family members that have gone before us and have many, many experiences and stories to share. Some of them have many, many stories to share that we have probably heard many, many times. But this is also a form of mentorship. And if you think about different experiences that you've had with the people in your family, you can likely point to a couple of experiences that you've had with mentorship in that way too. Peer mentoring. And this is a very common practice in colleges and even in high schools now, where they are matching students with students that want to have similar experiences either in their career path, in a classroom outcomes, things like that. They're grouping students together so that they can motivate and provide encouragement for one another. So that's another form of mentorship, peer mentorship. And we have coaching. Athletic coaches is an image that comes to mind. These athletic coaches are very important. They serve as mentors to athletes and young students and help them not only with athletic skills, but also the life skills that go along with learning the sport. This also is what a mentor looks like. So if you are familiar with the story of Star Wars, which I think everybody is, right? Yoda, Master Yoda, is a huge mentor for many, many people. And Luke in particular was looking for Master Yoda to mentor him. But when we think of what a mentor looks like and what we go to them for, they're different things, right? And so we don't want to be that person. We don't want to be like that person necessarily. Luke didn't want to be a small little green hairy guy that talked weird. He wanted to learn from Yoda, right? He wanted to learn his philosophies, his ways, his attitudes, his behaviors. He wanted to learn to use the Force. So there was an actual technical thing he wanted to learn from him too. But all these things are what we go to when we look for a mentor, or when we provide mentorship. These attitudes, these beliefs, these behaviors, the philosophies, right? So when we mentor somebody, we don't necessarily want them to become like us. So this can start to dispel that. I'm not good enough. Nobody's going to want to be like me. Those types of things. It can start to put those things, quiet those things in your mind. Attitudes, philosophies, behaviors, but also advice, right? Master Yoda gave a lot of pieces of advice. And if you can think of different people in your life who had given you pieces of advice at different points, whether solicited or not, these people were mentoring you as well, whether or not you knew it. So I had a boss who happened to be from India one time, and he gave me a piece of advice. He told me, beware of the cobra. Very confusing at first, but what he was talking about is that in India, this was like a piece of advice that his parents shared with him and they passed along. He said the cobra is very alluring and hypnotic in its poses and its ways. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful creature. However, if you get too close, it is deadly, right? And so in higher education, there's new people that come in, there's deans, there's other administrators, department chairs and whatnot that will sweep in and want to make these huge changes. And it kind of creates a divide between the faculty and the staff. Like, you've got a group of people that is on that bandwagon and really wants to go for that new way of doing things. And then there's the other half of people that, they want to stay the way things are. Very rarely are there people that are in the middle. So it comes in and it creates a divide. And then usually after a while, the people that can get too close to these people that have these beautiful, wonderful, alluring ideas, sometimes they can get hurt by that, with those types of relationships, or if they're going away from the relationships that they've had with others for so long to create this new type of relationship. So it definitely taught me to think about when somebody new comes in with sweeping ideas or sweeping changes and these new ideas, to really stay back a little bit and watch what they do over time before making decisions on whether or not to try things. It was a good piece of advice that I thought would make him, in my mind, what I would consider a mentor. Another easy piece of advice would be, if you see hoof prints, think horse, not zebra. I'm sure you guys have heard that for a long time. That was from my dad. And I use that every day. I get that email, and what do they mean by that? I'm not sure. Think too much into something. Just no, it's probably as simple as it is, right? It's very simple. Think about a horse, not necessarily a zebra. So, do you guys have any pieces of advice that you have received over the years that stick out to you, that you can point to, that you're starting to think, oh, maybe that person was mentoring me in a way? And if you could share those. Anybody?
Yeah, Pam, if you don't mind. When I was in the
Yes.
military, I was taught by my squad leader to make the hard right over the easy wrong, and that's something I've stuck with since.
Now, would you consider him a mentor?
Oh, most definitely.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's just one
For
lesson.
other reasons than that piece
That's
of
just
advice.
yeah. He also taught me the 3 R's: to be in the right time, right place, right uniform. A whole bunch of other stuff. Yeah, he was the best mentor I've ever had.
Wonderful.
I can echo that. I remember talk to folks now, and they'll say, who was most influential when you were in the service? And I'll go, I served with a lot of people, but there was the senior GI, and for 3 months I swore up and down I'd kill him if I ever saw him off the base. And now 30 years later, I go, man, I wish I could shake his hand and buy him a beer and tell him thank you for everything he taught me then. So
Yeah. I think mentors kind of, in a way that is indiscreet, let's say, encourage you to do things that in the back of your mind you might be thinking, I can't do, right? But somehow, in some way, shape, or form, they've said something, or maybe they've even just led by example, right? And if you respect them enough, you find yourself following suit. That's what I found with some of the mentors that I've had. They're just, like Pam was saying initially, they're not looking and saying, I'm the mentor, follow me, I know how to do this, I've got all this experience. It's more along the lines of, I really think it's a natural tendency, right? Or it's a skill that we can develop, where we need to be self-aware of what we're doing and what we're saying. And if you are approachable, and if you can make things that might seem very daunting to someone that is new to the experience, you can gently lead them down a path where they can start to get the momentum and start doing things on their own.
I remember the mentor that for my professional career, the gentleman who was a mentor, it was interesting. I don't think he realized he was doing it. And I didn't realize it until years later. And he and I actually met at a social function. He was the communications manager at an electronics company I worked at early in my career, back in the early 90s. And then fast forward 20 years, and I saw him at a social event. He came up to me and he goes, I have a question to ask you, Paul. He says, someone told me that you told them that I was your mentor. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble now, because I actually never cleared that with him. And he actually seemed kind of touched by it. He goes, thank you very much. Because that's kind of, he was honored by it. He goes, I didn't think you thought of me that way. So, but and he could be tough sometimes. He was an editor, and the way he mentored was very by example. But there's a couple funny stories about how he handled edits back to me that had been bled all over that, at the time I took great offense, and now I just chuckle and go, okay, I get it. So.
Wow. I don't know that I wouldn't chuckle at getting something that was handed to me with blood all over it. I might question,
Oh, no,
what he was doing, Paul.
the best line was he came up and he was actually very gentle. He looked at me and he said, Paul, this is, I'm like a year out of college. This is my first writing job. He goes, Paul, I did everything I could to fix this. I can't fix it. You got to start over. And I went, okay, it's first thing in the morning. So.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of, and Pam, maybe you can talk a little bit about this too. It's kind of like a matching situation almost. I remember one job that I had, we were brand new newbies coming in, and we were all given a mentor in the department. Somebody there was there with like tons of experience. They were, go-to person. They were there for just anything you could ever think of. And I remember being in my office one day, and there were a bunch of us that got hired in at the same time. And they were like, you were really lucky. You got assigned to so-and-so. And I remember kind of laughing to myself, right? Because I did get a lot out of my experience, and I did learn a lot. And the people that were disgruntled about, this is just one more thing I have to do is mentor this, person that doesn't know anything about this, or whatever the case might be. So it was all about, I think, the attitude and the approach, and so on and so forth. But I kind of agree with Paul. Some of the best mentors I think that we run across, I have one that her name's Elizabeth Kennedy. She's now a president at another university. She mentored me for years, and she was awesome. And I don't even think she realized that she was doing it. I don't even think she would think that I thought that she was a mentor. But definitely led by example and encouragement.
You should tell her. I'm
I
serious,
should.
Kelly. You should, because it's very meaningful. I mean, if you've ever been told that, by someone that they've looked up to you in some way, whether it's mentor or not mentor, if they use the term or not, it's very rewarding, and you should tell her. I think that would be a good thing.
I've written to her in like holiday cards or Christmas cards, thanks for the, leadership and for looking out for me, or for the, tips or men, I don't know that I ever used the word mentor, but I think you're right about that.
Yeah, it can be a little awkward, when you're trying to think of how to phrase it. Like, oh my gosh, you're the most wonderful person, and I just, don't come across like a stalker, right? But you're trying to say, like, oh, I appreciate you and the things that you do, right? I'm sorry. This is very informal. I hope you guys don't mind. I'm not a very formal presenter. But yeah, I think that it's important to let people know that you value what it is that you value about them in the relationship as mentor and mentee. Now, in Matt and Paul's case, it might not come across so well if you go up to your staff sergeant and be like, man, I appreciate you and I really think you're a great mentor. They'd probably tell you to
Well, it's interesting. You're
back in line and
right.
shut up. But
you're 100% right at the moment, but it's interesting. I'm on a website called Together We Serve that connects, and a lot of guys 30 years later are reaching out to somebody and saying, and then it does get a little bit, so it's not like it was.
Yeah, it's timing on things like that for sure.
I have the same experience with that, Paul, as far as with Facebook. I'm off Facebook now, but I joined it only to talk to the military friends, and I had the opportunity to tell a lot of them how I felt after the fact. So, but yeah, in the service, I didn't do it in the service.
Oh, not while you're in, no.
So yeah, there's some nuances there about approaching people that to let them know that they're the mentor and whatnot.
Pam, if you're in a situation where you're assigned to be a mentor to a colleague or whatnot, and like I said, like maybe somebody's not 100% on board, maybe they're getting ready to retire and they just want to be, see you later, they just want to ride out into the sunset, and then they're told, for the next 6 months, you have to do X, Y, Z. What is your advice to get someone motivated to be a mentor or excited about being a mentor? Like, what are your words of advice on that?
The first thing I would think is to realize that mentorship comes in many different forms. And I know you're referring to a more formalized form of mentorship where it's kind of, you are going to be assigned to work with this person. But again, it's you're teaching them to do certain tasks possibly, but it's also, you know, the things that you've experienced up to that point. Those are very important. And if you've been in a position for a long time, you know, you've recognized a lot of different pitfalls, and you can, you know, provide a lot of information for this person on what to steer clear of and what to avoid. And I'll talk to that a little bit later when we talk about the different types of mentorship. But you know, looking at it almost as a you know, a gift that you're being asked to mentor somebody. I know not everybody would view it that way, but it's definitely you know, it's the human experience, right? You're passing along knowledge, or you know, you're modeling something for somebody else, and that's basically what we're all kind of called to do, you know, regardless of any type of, you know, religious belief system. You know, it's been that way for generations, looking back in all cultures. You know, the elder passes along skills and information on a very basic level, you know, to the senior, to the junior, and so on and so forth. So it's a very natural you know, phenomenon that needs to happen. And I think if people really just give it a chance and open themselves up to have a relationship with the person that they are mentoring, they're going to find that they're going to get, you know, far more out of it than the student will in the long run.
Yeah, we actually kind of had, and Paul, I think we can both say we had the opposite situation where we were willing to be mentors, but we had a person in our department who was not willing to be mentored.
Uh-oh.
He was getting himself into, you know, doo-doo with the boss, basically. And I know at least three of us talked to him about, hey, this is, you know, sometimes you have to modify your behavior, blah, blah, blah. He did not want to hear it. He was very resistant to, in multiple things. That one sticks out in my head, that he just would not hear it. But yeah, and I don't know if you have advice for reaching people who don't want to be reached either.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I do have to say about a mentor-mentee relationship, that in the case where it will not work, it does not have very good chances of working, is when you have a person that's not receptive to being mentored or coached. Or I know with our academic coaching company, when we bring on new students, we give them what we call a coachability assessment. And it's basically a long kind of interview of questions, and we ask them about different, you know, case scenarios. What would you do if this happened? What would you do if that happened? And give them, you know, just to see if they're coachable, or if they're open and receptive to the idea of being coached. Because if you put somebody in that position or that place that is there to give information and guide and provide advice, if that person's not open to receiving it, if they're very closed-minded and just want to do things their way, then it won't work. So it has to be a two-way
great
street.
interview, like a great thing to have at an interview. Especially, we've been considering bringing on like younger, like co-ops, or
Right.
something younger. That sounds like an interesting way to approach interviewing too, actually.
Yeah, it's a great technique. We found it works very well, and it's adaptable for, you know, other platforms too. So for sure.
It would be kind of scary to think that someone new to a role or new to a job would not be open to learning from someone that wants to share their experience.
You would think that.
Gosh.
But it happens. I was gonna say, as it seems like Barbara and Paul have had that experience, and it does. And I mean, I can attest to some people that have come into different positions with that either fresh out of school and I know everything type of mentality, or I'm coming from another position and I'm moving up in the position, so I must be wonderful and I know what I'm doing and I don't need anybody else's advice. But they learn very quickly, like you said, got in doo-doo with the boss, right? They'll learn very quickly.
Yeah, he's no longer
Their
with the
advice
company.
might actually
Yeah.
be, relevant, and maybe they'll change their tune, or maybe they'll be fired, or maybe they'll quit. But it just, that type of relationship can't work if it's not, if they're not willing participants on both ends.
Yeah, he had really strong opinions, and the problem, of course, is that we were all old and maybe a little bit too stuck in our ways, and he really had these new ideas that were just going to make everything so much better. And we're stubborn. We're stubborn and old. You know, this is the way it is, and we like it.
Remember my advice
Kidding,
though,
kidding.
beware of the cobra.
Yeah,
Beware of the
that's it.
cobra.
Get off my
It is.
grass.
I mean, if it's shiny and new, there's not always bad things about doing things new, but there's definitely not, the people that come in have to be receptive. And anytime I start a new position or go into a new a job or a new place of employment, when there's other people there, you always have your ideas, and they always ask you in the interview, like, what kind of ideas are you going to bring, how are you going to change things? And I hate that question on an interview, because I don't know your culture yet, I don't know the problems yet, the challenges yet, I don't know what works well yet, so I have to get acclimated to that. I'm not going to go in on day one and rock the boat. I have to talk to people. I have to assimilate into the situation and then figure out how I can make changes, or be a change agent if there needs to be change. Sometimes things don't need to be changed, they just need to be tweaked or upgraded, or so sometimes just the word change can scare people. So, all right, let me move on to my next slide. I think I am sharing my screen. Can we still see Master Yoda there?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let me try to advance my slide.
Oh, there he is.
Okay, so what is the action of mentoring, right? As mentoring as a verb, what does it mean to actually mentor someone? Well, we talked about showing them how to do something, a task. You keep popping up here, sorry. A task or a job, something that you've done previously and been successful at, right? We've all had those experiences where we've done something, been successful at it, moved upward and onward, mastered something. So we can show somebody else how to do that. We can make someone feel comfortable in a new environment, a new employee, a new student, a new member of our church congregation, whatever it might be. Making somebody feel comfortable in a new environment is a form of mentorship. It might just be like, hey, how you doing? Where are you from? Welcome. What brings you here? Those types of friendly conversations that not everyone is great at starting. If you, just the difference between my husband and myself, I'm the one that will do that. He is not the one that will do that. He will, of course, be friendly and engaged in the conversation once it starts, but he is not going to approach anybody and welcome them as a new member. That's just not his thing. So people have different levels of comfort with that. Providing advice, encouragement, just kind of things that we talked about. Listen to questions patiently. This is a hard one, especially if you have that new employee that feels like they know everything, but then they want to ask you questions of where is this and who do I go to for this and what's that. Listen to their questions and patiently answer them. Usually the questions are multi-stepped and they want answers right away, real quickly, without not a whole lot of background. So they have to learn to be patient to hear your answers as well. Checking in with them, that's a huge form of mentorship. Just, you know how it feels to be checked in with by someone else, a friend, a colleague, family member. at our work, we greet everybody. It's kind of a strange thing, but we all adapted to it. It's the work culture now. The first thing we do in the morning is we go through and we say, hey, what's your MSP? And that stands for my smile production. And I can't remember the speaker who used that term. But it basically means what makes you smile, what's going on in your life that you're happy about today, that you want to share with me. And it could be little things, but the rule is you can't just say, oh, I'm grateful for my family and my, that's kind of the generic out that everybody uses when they don't want to think of something. But it's good because you're sharing something about yourself and what's going on with you. Doesn't have to be too personal, but something that makes you smile, that you're grateful for the day. So it kind of sets everybody in a good mindset, even if you come in a crappy mood. And then if you don't have anything particularly interesting, usually somebody else does. So it's kind of nice just to share those things about what is going on in people's lives. So, and then you follow up with them on those things. Hey, Kelly, I wanted to see how your doctor's appointment went, or I wanted to see, did your kid end up coming in, placing in the competition, or just those little things. Making that effort to check in with somebody like that is a form of mentorship. And that's definitely a less known one, but it goes along with that when you're checking in with somebody on different things. Also, if you're checking in on them, if they need help with different points of a project at work or something, right? You're checking in to see how they're progressing. And then eventually, if you are retiring, or if you are, passing along, moving to another position and passing a position on to somebody, you're going to have a transitional period where you're passing on responsibilities to them. So those are all actions that we would consider mentorship. So does anybody have questions at this point? I'm trying to watch my time and make sure I keep time for questions and get to my most important points. I know we started a little bit late too.
Do you have a schedule for checking in with people? I'm just thinking that that's something that could really easily fall, especially if you're not in the same building with somebody. Do you like just
okay?
put
So
it
comes easier to some people. That's a great question.
It's a
some
horrible
people, it's very natural.
For me, it's not. I can tell you.
Okay. I gathered, because when you asked if I had a schedule, that tipped me off that that's not something that comes natural. For some people, it doesn't come natural, or like you mentioned, you're not in the same building, right? So putting a little note, when you talk to them about something that was coming up or going on. We do this a lot with our students because we have multiple students, and trying to remember who has a test every single time, or what they have coming up, because they got a million things going on in their life, and trying not to get them confused with somebody else. Like, it's a lot. So yes, I make notes when I'm meeting with students, and follow up with them, and then sometimes you even have to set little alarms on your phone. Follow up with so-and-so, ask them about this, ask them about that. But it does get easier as you go, and it becomes almost a habit when you're talking to somebody. It's almost like you're taking notes. It's like, okay, remember this, remember that. And then, even if you have to write it down in front of them, you can tell them, I'm writing this down because I don't want to forget. Like, I want to see how this goes for you. That's an incredibly powerful thing to do with somebody. And it shows them you really care.
I like that better than like 9 o'clock on Fridays. So yeah. Okay, you're gonna have a test, blah 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 date, and make a note to follow up then, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't do it at the same time and day necessarily. I mean, if you have to, you have to, but it gives the impression of more spontaneity if you just kind of set different times, and then you put it in your free time too. Right? It's all based around your free time. So okay. I'm still sharing my screen. Okay, good.
Could you comment on the different...
Oh, sorry. I've already committed here. Okay, now I thought this was particularly funny because I had this built in before I ever saw Paul's background there, where he has on the music stand that he has his Lionel Richie music there. So the whole point of me putting that in there was to see, are you guys starting to feel...
With all due respect, That's not Lionel Richie. That's Jim Croce.
What? All right,
That's
hold that up to the camera.
there. You see, Jim Croce guitar.
All right. Yeah, well, I had a good shot at from back there. It does look like Lionel Richie. So
Yes, ma'am.
anyway,
Okay, I'm
That gave
sorry. I
you
messed it
two.
all up.
no, you're fine. My whole point in sharing that was, do you guys feel like you're being called to be a mentor now that we're talking more about the different forms of mentorship and the people that you've looked up to into your life? Do you start to feel like maybe you have some talents and things in your life that you can share with other people? So hence my, is it me you're looking for? All right, before I move to my next slide, did somebody have a question? I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh, I was wondering if you could comment on the definitions of mentoring versus coaching, because when you were talking about, people feeling reluctant to be mentored, I'm wondering if it's based in part on for some people, based on maybe a bad coaching experience where they felt that it was all one-way communication. The coach was talking at them. And so when they think of mentoring, they might be making an association when those two concepts are very different. So I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. That's excellent. That's an excellent point. Now, coaching involves a lot of mentoring, or it should, and mentoring involves a lot of coaching, or it should, right? They are slightly different. There's slightly different nuances to their definitions, but essentially they're doing the same things, right? They're encouraging, they're providing inspiration, they're modeling behaviors. If you think of a traditional athletic coach and maybe the harshness of that, or drill instructors, right? They are trying to, they have a purpose in being harsh, right? They're trying to instill specific things into you so that it becomes automatic muscle memory. It's not necessarily just to be mean for the sake of being mean, right? But sometimes you can feel that way when you're being coached. When you're being mentored, it shouldn't feel necessarily as formal, right? You're not going to practice twice a week or 3 times a week to get coached.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a difference there. But again, the two are very intertwined, and you're right, there could be some reluctance if they've had a bad experience in the past. But kind of my point is, you don't have to specifically call it one thing or another. It doesn't have to necessarily have a formal label as I'm going to coach you or I'm going to mentor you. It's more of an action, right? It's more of a you're trying to model behaviors, and you're trying to share philosophies and share advice with somebody. And so there's slight nuances that I think you could make someone who possibly had a bad experience kind of overcome those things when working with you. And that would be a good question to ask on the front end. Did you ever have an experience with a coach, or that you didn't like, and then talk about that. You could start right there and get that on the table and right out in the open, and then kind of move on from there.
Yeah. Well, thank you, because I know that the term coach, can be used in different scenarios. Like, you have the football coach, for example, who has to gather the team in the back room and say, okay, you guys, you got to do this play and this play and this play differently. So he's coaching them about how to win. And, and then there are some, corporate scenarios where coaching might be used as a term to, in low performing employees, things like that. So sometimes when you hear coaching, you hear of like this one, you envision this one way communication, and so, that's why I brought it up. But I do appreciate that mentoring and coaching, those concepts do overlap in many ways. So thanks a lot for commenting about that.
Sure. Can I interject real quick? I think that with the difference too with the coaching and the mentoring is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Pam, please, but like with the mentoring, it's a less if this makes sense, a less defined ending point, right? It's more,
That's very,
you're
that's very perfectly
volunteering
put.
the
Yes.
information. You don't have to use it. I'm not going to hold you accountable, the boss is, right? Whereas
Mhm.
coaching, when you're coaching someone, the person that's being coached understands that on Tuesday, I'm going to get asked about XYZ. I'm going to, they're going to see if I understand what they asked me to learn by now,
Yeah,
right?
there's a little more
So,
accountability as they
yeah,
go through the process.
yeah. But, cycling back to, good coaching versus bad coaching or bad experiences, I should say. Again, I think it all has to do with, the mindset of the coach. You can say, I hate to say old school mindset, right? Unfortunately, versus someone that's open-minded and encouraging someone along um, with positive words and reinforcement.
For sure. Yeah, that's definitely a good distinction too. Um, so I just wanted to talk quickly about types of mentorship. We talked about formal and informal, the traditional mentorship when you're matched up with someone, which by the way, there are some good relationships that have come out of those forced matchups at work. But usually I really prefer to see people find a chemistry between each other a little bit more naturally, and that happens as coworkers a lot. You'll tell, very early on whether or not you're going to be able to get along with this person if you have anything in common, those types of things. So the traditional face-to-face mentoring relationships, whether they are formalized, selected for us, or if we pick them and they're a little bit less formal, that's one type. Of course, since the pandemic started, we've got this distance mentoring or e-mentoring, which has become very popular. For us, for academic coaching, it has definitely taken off since the pandemic has started. Students in particularly need these mentors in their lives that can really help them get over these challenges that they have and this learning loss that they're experiencing from having this upheaval in their education. And I tell you, when we first shifted to all online, because before we did combination of face-to-face and online, we were very nervous. And so actually were the parents and the students, because students didn't do well with remote learning. Some people, get this Zoom fatigue. They don't necessarily like these types of meetings all the time, right? But I'll tell you some things that I think made us very successful, and Kelly, you can speak to this too. I think is that we really focus on the relationship with the student, right? We do those check-ins. We're constantly looking for what is going on with them to make it relevant. So we really spend time building that relationship. We lay out very clear expectations for our students and the coach. What will the coach provide for you, and the student, what is the expectation that you will do for the coach? And this can translate to mentor and mentee as well. And then another thing that I think we do really well is we structure our sessions. I think that's important when you're doing online things, so you don't end up kind of going down a rabbit hole or, oh, what did you do today? I don't know. What did you do? What do you want to talk about? What do you want to talk about? It's structured. So I think the combination of the relationship, the emphasis on the relationship building, having a structure to each session, and then laying out the expectations have really helped us to be more than proficient, I'd say pretty darn good at e-mentoring or distance mentoring. Then of course we've got peer mentoring, as we kind of spoke to. If any of you have been peer mentors formally or informally, I don't see any students on here, but that's a very common thing that they're starting to do and emphasize in colleges and schools. Matt, what's that?
Pam, I am a student at the University of Akron, but I'm also a lieutenant at the Stowe Fire Department, where I am actually a mentor and in charge of I'm a fire instructor in charge of training and leading our firefighters. So but I am a student.
Awesome. Okay, thanks. So, okay, now I'm going to pick on you a little bit then. So with your
Sure.
peer mentoring, especially in the firehouse, right? How would you say that differs from then a more traditional mentor-mentee relationship when the person is traditionally older or has more experience than the mentee coming in? When it's peer to peer, what's the difference you feel there?
Well, I'm a more senior member and I'm a lieutenant, so I'm in charge of them. So it is more of the senior to the junior. But yeah, there's definitely mentorship with guys that are above me also.
Okay.
I'm 39 years old, but I have people underneath me on the fire truck that are 50 years old. So it kind of goes both ways. That's more of a mutual relationship between us. They teach me quite a bit about the job, and they understand that they don't want the responsibility of being the lieutenant that has to make the call. So it's it can be pretty fun, rewarding.
Well, great. Well, that leads me to the next one, which is reverse mentoring. So when you are younger yet leading a senior person in a certain job or position or something, that can lead to a whole lot of questions too. I had been promoted one time at work to a senior position where I was going to be in charge of who were my coworkers for the longest time, and that was the question that, like, the $10,000 question they asked me when moving up is, how will you handle now being in a leadership position over your peers that you have been, in the trenches with for so long? How will you actually provide leadership, and how will you um, say no to them when they ask you for things? And that was a very, very tough interview, I have to say, because that was very challenging to think about that. Um, and I was younger than almost all of my colleagues at that point, and they had mentored me, so it was challenging. And then other ways we can mentor. So we talked about a lot of different ways, what it looks like, the active mentoring, different formal, informal. But have you ever thought about like writing a procedure manual? If we've got our technical writers in here, we do this all the time. But if you're leaving a position, you've got so much experience in how you do these little nuances, open your different programs, where you click, and how you find these things that you might have spent so much time in your career working on to find these things that they're just second nature to you. But writing out these things in detail for the person that comes after you is a form of mentorship, and they will appreciate it, let me tell you. Your filing system. I don't know about you, but I've gone into several positions where I look at the filing system and say, what the hell were they doing? Like, there's either no system or they had this weird system and you couldn't figure it out. And it took me, weeks and weeks just to figure out where things were. Leave some clues. Leave your filing system, make it ABC kindergarten simple, or provide some instruction to the person that's going to be coming in there. So actually, there are things that you can do that are not physical one-on-one leadership, mentorship per se. Okay. The ever popular question, if I'm going to do this and I got to exude this time and this effort and patience with these people, what do I get out of it, right? Some organizations will actually pay you to mentor people, not very many, not that I know of, but there are some organizations that, if you are in a senior level position and you would take on a mentor or a mentee rather, sometimes it's paid. But more often than not, it's not paid. So what types of things have we talked about that is in it for us? Well, the first and foremost is that it is a reciprocal relationship. We talked about how when it won't work, when someone's being forced to and doesn't want to, or when someone as the mentor, or when the mentee has no interest in learning. They're not even a mentee at that point, are they? When the junior has no interest in learning from the senior, and I don't necessarily mean age level, they're just more experience-wise, right? So it's a reciprocal relationship. We get out of it what we put in. We hear that so often, but in this scenario, it couldn't be more true. All right, this can validate your work, right? You can start to feel proud of all of your accomplishments. And this is not boasting and bragging on yourself. This is just, a natural evolution of where you've gotten to in your career. You've gotten to a certain point where now you can pass along these skills. And think back to like those first days where you were so frustrated and overwhelmed and you thought you would never know all this stuff. How am I going to learn all this stuff? Well, now you're like an old pro. So being a mentor can validate your work. It is definitely a form of leadership. It feels pretty good to mentor somebody and to know that you're making a difference in their lives and they look up to you. Again, it's not a vanity thing or an arrogance thing. It's just, a human thing. And it might actually help you remember why you got into your job or field in the first place. At certain points in our career, we can start to question that or just get run down, right? It's just a normal thing to just get fatigued and run down. But having someone new come in, it helps you remember what that was like. And it helps you remember why you got into that in the first place, because they're kind of full of excitement and fresh out of college or fresh out of another position, and they're willing to learn. And so that can kind of help, spark your memory there. All right, I've got a couple challenges for you before we wrap this up. The first one, I want you to identify one person who you could benefit learning something from. Anybody in your life that you think, I want to model their behaviors, their philosophies, their attitudes, something like that. And just, personally, write that down in your planner or somewhere that you're going to look at that in the next couple days and think about how you might approach that person and ask, not necessarily, will you be my mentor? Will you be my Valentine? Will you be my mentor? But how you would approach that person and ask for advice or friendship or just, kind of do work on some of those relationship building things that we talked about, like checking in. Another challenge I would like you to do is identify one person or a group of people who could benefit from learning something from you. Now, hopefully, you spent all this time talking about how wonderful you are. You've moved past that I'm not good enough for anybody to want to learn anything from me point of view, and are now starting to see that, like Lionel Richie, it might be you they're looking for, right? So think about a person or a group of people that could benefit from learning something from you. You have lots of skills and lots of things to give. So again, in that little place that you're going to write these down and think about these over the next couple days. And again, there's some nuances. You're not going to walk up to these people and be like, hey, I'm so awesome, you should learn from me. There's different ways that you can delve into that relationship, right? And we talked about some of those. My shameless plug, if any of you would like to coach as a form of mentorship, this is our website, academiccoachingspecialists.com. Just visit the website, and then if you click under the About tab, Becoming a Coach, it's just a real quick informal type of form, and we'll talk with you and see if you have any interest in becoming an academic coach as a form of mentorship. Okay, I skipped through a lot of things, but in the interest of time, I just wanted to see if we had questions or different points of view that we could kind of share with everybody. You guys are so talkative. Let's see. I'll do the old teacher thing. I'll call on somebody. Let me see who's looking at their shoes.
I think I asked all my questions.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh no, I think I asked all my questions during the presentation. So.
Pam, I was going to say to add on to you were saying why should you mentor? What's in it for you? And there's a lot of professions where your life might depend on it. And so the people that are coming into my fire department, not only do I want them to be prepared to help me out if I'm ever alone and in need of help, in a smoke-filled room, I want to know that my other buddies are going to be taken care of, and that they also have somebody that's well-trained professional. And at the end of the day, it's succession planning too. I want to leave it in good hands. I want to know that the people behind me can take over. So that's Not
I
necessarily
wrote that
for.
down. I thought that was super important. I wrote that down, that sometimes your life can depend on it and those different situations. That's a really, really important point. Yes, for sure. Who else? Do you want to share? Have anybody popped into your head of who you think you would be a good mentor for? One of the exercises I skipped would have kind of helped us with that. I was going to kind of ask people what 3 things that they think they're terrible at and 3 things they think they're great at, and then we would do like a little match game and like speed mentoring here. But is there anything that you could think of when you were looking at those challenges? Who do you think, what group of people, or who could benefit from learning a skill, or something that you possess that you feel you have come to a point in your life where you have some mastery?
I'll go first. I'll get the ball rolling here. I especially with Matt's in my online technical report writing class. There were a couple other people I noticed under attendees. I think they were students that have dropped off. But one thing that I try to reinforce in class is the time management thing. And a lot of, we'll pull Matt aside. He's got that one down, I think. But with students that are brand new college freshmen, coming right out of high school, they cannot manage their time in a lot of cases. And that sometimes is very detrimental to their academic career, moving forward. So I think that is one area that I feel that I could help students with. Even though I'm teaching writing, they have to learn how to map out their assignments and so on and so forth. And hopefully they could carry that on into their professional lives.
Did you mentor my son?
You're kidding me? I've got 2 of my own kids. They're like, hey, how come you're doing this and we don't have one?
Maybe he's listening to you.
Call me up, Barb. I can hook you up. We've got lots of academic coaches we can help your son with.
Sure.
Yeah, Kelly, that's why we have a business is if I have to put it on one thing, it's the lack of time management skills that college students have, especially coming fresh out of high school. That's the biggest thing we hear from parents when they call us, is that, my kid is smart. They made pretty good grades, but they are just disorganized. They are not turning things in. They don't know what to do. They're kind of all over the place. That's huge. And for you to be able to share that with students is a great form of mentorship for sure. Matt, you talked about some awesome groups that you already do mentorship with. Any new ones come to mind?
I guess one of the skills I used to be good at is I'm also a paramedic. I still am a paramedic. I guess I used to be pretty good at tubing people. And so that's something I could probably do a little bit more hands-on with some of the new guys. But I just, as a lieutenant, I'm more of a team lead. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really hard skill to master, from what I understand from different students I've worked with that were studying for the paramedic exam. That's one of the main areas that they need extra practice in. And then my sister is a nurse at the Cleveland Clinic, and she works, she's a surgical nurse, and so she leads a team of surgical nurses, and they do a lot of hands-on. She does cardiac and thoracic, so there's a lot of tubing and intubations and things that go on there that she's constantly showing. She's like, I swear to God, if I have to show one more person how to do this, that's where the good attitude about being the mentor comes in, because they at the Cleveland Clinic, they definitely have a mentoring program where they have to show people how to do things. And as I wrote down, it's people's lives depend on it for sure. They have to have those skills passed on from person to person. And you can read about it, and you can read about it and read about it, but until you actually physically have to do it in the moment, there's no substitute for that experience. And to have somebody there that has done it before you many, many times is very reassuring. Anybody else want to share or have any questions?
Well,
Right. Well, thank you so
we get-
much, guys. I really appreciate. Oh, sorry. Does somebody have questions?
I was just going to say thank you, Pam, for sharing your
Oh,
time.
yes.
Matt, thank you for being here. My other students that were here that have left, thank you. Thank all of you for being here. We really appreciate your input and experience on this really important topic. Thank you, Pam.
Yeah,
Thanks,
it's really
guys.
great.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck with your classes, Matt.
Thank you very
Good
much.
night, everybody.
Good night.
Goodbye, all.